じゃあ、おはようございます。皆さん、ようこそ. I am very happy for folks to be joining us. I don't know what that was, but I'm happy for you to be here. Lars and Lars could actually, start speaking German. It could be a whole kind of like, a
Ja,
language thing here. I don't know why we're doing
ja.
languages, but
Das war ein perfektes Intro.
there you go. Exactly. It is a big world that speaks different languages. And so we're going to kind of cover a little bit of that today. Right, Lars?
Absolutely. And we have a special guest, the reigning AM rock star, Lisa. And here she is. Hey, Lisa, great to see you.
You mentioned it. I thought we should bring Lisa on stage.
Well, thanks for having me. I wanted to talk a little bit about Project Stardust, which launched around the time of Rockstars and is one of the most incredible open source skills I've ever seen. So should I just jump right in, Lars, or do you want to?
No, actually,
Yeah.
I want to learn a bit more about you and about being a rock star and what it entails, and what you're doing at Accenture and how you got to start with AEM.
Sure. So I started AEM in 2014. I was a web editor at Zebra Technologies as part of the Motorola acquisition. So I've been working mainly in AEM, although some analytics for the past 12 years, and Marketo, and went across the whole suite. But the whole idea behind Rockstars was actually inspired by Brett Birschbach's Adapt To presentation in 2020. He did like a custom component generator, which is really cool. And when I saw that it was the 10th anniversary of Rockstars, I was like, God, I would love to do like the Edge Delivery Services version of what Brett did in 2020, but for Rockstars. So I didn't like set out to do context engineering. I was just trying to solve the problem the best I could as a functional person, and that required context engineering, and it required objective scoring models, and that's just how I had to approach the problem coming from where I was coming from.
Right, and that session is actually recorded, right? So we will be able to put a link as an overlay once we get the recording.
Once we get that link up.
Perfect. Yeah. So what do you do at Accenture?
So I'm a AM functional platform lead. So right now I'm doing a lot of agentic SME work on a large client project. But I also do a ton of like product adoption and training on AEM, just like thought leadership, and I love it. They're sending me to an engineering bootcamp next week, which is like, it's the best. Like the opportunities to learn here are incredible.
Great to hear that. Are there any recent launches that you can talk about?
With our accelerators, or with what?
With your clients in particular.
Oh, I can't speak to that directly, but I am really good friends with Angel Andrea. She kind of manages me. Maybe she could give you some case studies that she's working on that are pretty incredible. She's deep in the EDS space and a really good resource for that.
Perfect. You already mentioned Stardust, and I can see that you're chomping at the bit. So why don't we jump in and talk about Stardust?
Great. Okay, so I was a web editor in 2014, and I worked my way up to managing the APAC sites. And as you know, APAC runs about 10 years ahead of the world in mobile adoption. So while it's very hard to know where APAC's going to go next, at least for me, if I want to know where we're going next, I always look to APAC. So in 2016, I was managing the APAC sites, working through translations, standing up regional content for them. And I was going back to our global brand team and our global UX team and saying, like, well, you're gonna point your phone at your laptop, and you're going to use a QR code to connect to WeChat. And of course, we do this all the time now, but making a business case for that this UX experience would reach critical adoption, that it was worth customizing the global template. It really taught me that, like, the importance of regional autonomy, right? And that people are really different around the world. And for my designers on the call, you all know about sans serif and serif logic, right? It affects reading comprehension. Reading comprehension affects conversion, right? but it doesn't apply to every alphabet. It doesn't apply to Asian language characters in particular. And so why are we hosting our fonts in the global style sheet? And that was kind of like where this started. And so I've been harping on this for years, but until I saw Stardust around the time of Summit, I was like, I can finally do this efficiently at scale, where I'm chaining things together, with the addition of just 2 markdown files, basically, to what Stardust does out of the box, which I'll walk you through in a moment. You can regionalize an entire site in a way that's brand specific and culturally relevant, put it through Emma to componentize the web, and you can go from global brand to regionalized site in Edge Delivery Services in under a day. It's incredible. Like the stuff your team is coming out with right now, I can't say enough about it. It's very easy to lightly hack it and get it like exactly the way I want it. And like even out of the box, it's like it does so much.
Yeah. And I should probably add a couple of things about Stardust. Stardust is what's the best way to describe it? It's a set of skills around reproducible design optimization for web experiences. And it was developed by Paolo Mortadelli. And I think Paolo is listening in right now, live as we speak. And we've been using it in Claude Code. We've been using it in AM Coder. We've been using it in Slick, and a bunch of other surfaces. And it's an incredibly powerful model, especially if you are thinking, well, Claude Code is only for code, right? It can go way beyond that. And most importantly, if you've seen AI designed websites, it's able to break out of these cliches, right? It's able to break out of this purple gradient and the eyebrows and the little colored borders on the left side of the rounded rectangle box. And so it was developed by somebody who has an eye for design and a knack for speaking to agents and getting them to and of course it is extensible. So I'm really excited to see what you've been building with it.
Well, thanks. So Stardust, it interviews you. So out of the box, it rebrands your site, like you said, and it interviews you along the way, which allows you to sidestep a ton of cliches with your brand. And that was one of the reasons why I really pinpointed it for this regionalization exercise. Is one of the things that I was worried about, like as an American who speaks one language, who hasn't traveled extensively yet, like I'm like, well, can this really pinpoint the nuance of regional UX when it transcreates the design? And what I'm finding is that it really can. Like it really sidesteps a lot of generalizations. It really gets to the heart of what's going to be meaningful in region. And because it does it so fluidly and efficiently, it allows you to create almost like an experimentation factory where you're saying this, not that, rapidly across your site. And the ROI on being able to do that it's undeniable.
And on experimentation, I would like to add, right? A lot of people, when they think experimentation, are struggling with 2 things, right? Number one, they're saying, it's so hard to come up with variants. And number 2, when they come up with variants, they're saying, let's try the red button versus the blue button. And the red button versus the blue button is never moving the needle, right? So you talk for weeks about red versus blue, then you decide to do a test. Then you run the test for 2 weeks. Then the test is coming back inconclusively, and you're disappointed, right? When the reality should be, hey, let's do a big fat redesign, and test if that has an impact, right? And if it doesn't have an impact, well, then it wasn't big and fat enough, and then we need to go back to the drawing board, right? But at the same time, in the past, this was something where just building this redesign took a very long time, right? And then you always had people who were emotionally invested in either the status quo or the new variant, right? So that you couldn't run an honest test and an honest experimentation. And I think that's changing now.
And I think for marketers, like dear God, do we have to go through more transformation? Like, we're all pretty exhausted by this point. But what's helpful about this is, like, if we hold the brand, the global brand as canon, and I'll show you in a moment which parts I think should be held as canon, you're allowed for the interpretation of brand in region fluidly at scale, and you're allowing for the tactical interpretation of that regional content by IT, which is where it should really live, right? And so with Emma and some of these other agents from AEM, you're allowing for a much more fluid reaction to the market and to market disruption and to trends, which, as I've been talking, I talk to clients every day, like marketers, like, do we have to go through more change management? It's not that we don't want to, right? But like, I think at this point we have to be very clear about where the boundaries are and where our energy is best spent. And it's not, to your point, doing a big fat redesign. It's testing, it's being light, it's being agile, it's being fluid, and it's letting people have autonomy where autonomy is justifiably the right decision, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So do we want to jump into your presentation?
Sure, yeah. So again, this started with managing the APAC sites in 2016. And when I saw this, I was like, well, this is great, right? Because I can use Writer to build style guides. And this is something that I've talked about for a while, is like, when you build a style guide, it should really have the kind of governance where you have certain sections that are global and certain sections that are regionally relevant, right? And we see this reflected in our CMS often, and where
Hold on, Lisa. So explain Writer, like the things that potentially people aren't all exposed to. What is Writer?
So Writer is an agentic platform. It's a phenomenal translations model as well. It always makes the Stanford Helm leaderboard for the quality of its Palmyra model. It is also HIPAA compliant. It is SOX 2 certified. And so and it's also cost efficient. It has a different cost structure than Claude proper. So it makes for a really good path for some of these heavier strategic initiatives, because what you want to do is hold what's going to be strategic within like a model that will be cost effective in measuring it and managing it long term, and also something that you can kind of confidently put information that may be sensitive, maybe a product that hasn't launched yet, maybe content that you aren't ready to share, like it's held kind of sacred within Writer. So that's why I'm holding my more strategic elements upstream there.
Okay.
And then we're going to pull that style guide into a markdown file when we're ready. We're going to run it through Stardust. And then Emma is able to take the HTML output from Stardust and turn it into Edge Delivery Services blocks, and it's phenomenal. And then once it's in Edge Delivery Services, of course, it's ready for the regional markets, which is where AEM Translations agent can pick up the deltas and run your translations model day to day as expected. So the benefits are transcreation is always better than translation. Anyone who works in translations will tell you this and say, of course we know this, right? But transcreation is often expensive. It is often time consuming. It requires more regional cycles. It requires a lot more trust, stakeholder trust. You have to have a really good communications pipeline going. And it's really hard to do it on a UX level for regional markets. So usually you would choose your regional markets that would get transcreated UX design. Often the emerging markets where the linear regression, where the M coefficient was steepest, weren't getting the attention to grow as fast as they could because they didn't already have the historic revenue to justify the cost of transcreating the market. Additionally, what I'm recommending, and this is a little art of the possible, is doing a closed loop feedback where you're taking the analytics of what worked in region and feeding it back into the regional style guide to make it canon. So, hey, we noticed this shade of green worked really well in Japan. Let's add it to the style guide so that it becomes something that we really commit to. And that goes back to the experimentation factory piece of it. Additionally, if you find something works well in Japan and you're like, hey, let's try this in Korea. Hey, it worked in Korea. Let's try it in China. Hey, let's commit it to maybe an APAC region style guide. Hey, let's try a version of it in LATAM. Eventually, it can work its way up into the global brand style guide, right? Where you're saying, we find that around the world, people respond positively to these brand elements and associate them with our brand in a positive way. It leads to conversion. Well, why wouldn't you put that back in your global brand guideline? And now you've got a full feedback loop where you're able to kind of talk about brand equity and say, these brand elements, these assets are adding to our equity. Frictionless regional autonomy, that is so important, right? Like I said, I spent cycles on the QR code, and it was necessary, but like when we do multi-site management, when we do inheritance, when we do frictionless regional autonomy, like we create trust, right? Because you're avoiding the risk of miscommunication between people who are fundamentally different around the world and maybe speak different languages. Oftentimes things get lost in translation. I find people who speak English as a second language often speak simple declarative sentences because it's the easiest path to translate, right? But definitely, like, then maybe they're worried about like the perception of that, and they shouldn't be. But just different languages are translated differently. You lose the risk of miscommunication when you allow for regional autonomy.
Right.
So when you say that, yeah, it's all good. So the regional autonomy, the proposed solution that we are talking about today, who would be the folks that are involved in these transformations, the transcreation? So what is the local team's involvement, and what is potentially a central managing team?
It depends on industry. So it could be a regional brand manager, it could be a regional field marketer. It could even be, if you have like a captive sales team instead of a commission-only sales team, it could even be them that are managing the content. So it's industry specific, it's specific to B2B or B2C, and it's subject to regulatory, which is another regional concern.
Right on.
Yeah. So let me get into the markdown files themselves. So there's two that I want to go over. And the first is introducing our brand. It is a luxury baby sunscreen, because why not? And so I've created this fictional brand in this fictional HTML site. And you can see it's made for the US, right? We have SPF 50, we have ounces, we have dollars, we have subscribe and save 15%. So channel is going to be email.
Yeah.
And what I've done is I've created two things. I created the brand board, which is the first step of Stardust. So this is validating that Stardust is interpreting your baseline brand correctly. You can see that it is. And then I went and I created a sample regional style guide for Japan. Now this would be created with your SI partner or your in-house agency and your brand team, right? So blue is going to be your globally locked elements. So these are the parts that are, no matter what, your brand always has the same logo, right? It always has the same trademark. And then the green elements can be regionally adapted. So this is typography. So I'm using Noto Sans here for Japanese typeface. And then going into color, right? We want to make sure that we're using color appropriately, because red means warning or danger in the US. It means stop. It doesn't mean that everywhere in the world. We want to make sure that we're using things that are relevant to people and with the associations we make. Communication.
And I see that you're opting for a much higher information density, which is one thing that I noticed, right? That when you visit Japan or China and you visit local websites, you as somebody used to Western web design, you think, oh my God, there's so much going on here.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely a regional preference.
Yeah, and it also, like, the communication of the words themselves, right? Like in Germany and the US, we're very individualistic. You own the outcome in these countries. Where at a country like Korea or Colombia, you might say we arrive at the solution together, right? And so making sure that we're using the right cultural approach to our communication will improve conversion as well. We also have a section for claims and regulatory. So we see Japan uses a PA system for their SPF. They're going to use volume as milliliters. The claims need to be specific to region. Age is something that's regulatory in Japan. So you wouldn't put this sunscreen on a baby younger than 6 months. And then we also have our brand personas as well. Yeah. And the other markdown file is UX heuristics. So this is brand specific, right? You would create this bespoke in your organization. The regional version can be static. So once these regional markdown files,
you need to zoom in a bit. I can't read that.
Oh.
And so
yeah. So the regional markdown file is region specific. So this would work for any brand per region. So what I did was I took sites that I thought were especially like good representations of Japanese sites, and I paired them. So Japanese KitKat versus KitKat UK, right? Japanese Samsung versus, I chose Global US, it's a Korean brand, but I wanted to do English to Japanese. KFC, Yum Brands, US to Japanese. Suntory is actually a Japanese brand that has US presence. So this was a little bit of a reverse one. And then I chose 3 Japanese native brands, Uniqlo, Muji, and Shiseido. And then I have my own local HTML file, which I'll circle back to and rate against when it's done, regionalizing to make sure that I fell in line. And then what I did was I kind of cherry picked UX heuristics rules. So I did Nielsen's 10. I chose.
You need to do a bit more zooming here, because this is, I know that this is valuable, and I know people are going to screenshot this. So
of course.
We're going to help them.
Okay. So I chose 28 UX heuristics rules. And what I did was I took screenshots just at 1200 width of each of the website's pages, and you have to sample the pages. So I had like 8. So a 404, an error state, checkout cart flow, homepage. I forget, I could give you, anyone on the call, if you want to know what the IA sample pages are, I can send a list after the call. But I took those 8 and I rated them against each of the rules on a 0 to 4 scale. For accessibility, I used Lighthouse so that there was a standard objective approach, and then just used a range within what Lighthouse scores to decide whether it was a 1, 2, 3, or 4 here. Then I took my notes from my UX heuristics research, and I determined patterns that were true of region. And I put them here, and this is the best part of the spreadsheet. It builds the markdown file for you based off of winning patterns and winning scores. So then you just take this tab, you build your markdown file off of it, and what you're going to do is nest it within your Stardust file. So I'm just going to advance through so you can see what's purple is what's added. So I added a regional subfolder within my Stardust project file for Japan, and you're going to add the markdown style guide, the PDF I just showed you, as well as the Excel tab markdown file output within this subfolder.
Okay.
I do have a briefings folder too. That's a separate thing, but yeah, like you can add folders within Stardust, which allows you to just get different results out of it. And then for the actual output, Stardust took this as the input. I approved the brand board. I added my 2 markdown files and I ran it against this for a prototype, and it offered up 3 versions. So the first version is this, which is pretty good. I want to point out that for channel, it added Line at the top where what email was. The Line is a social media site in Japan. It's a little more information dense. You can see that it changed to Japanese yen. I've got milliliters now. I've got PA. I've got my claims. I've got this green line down at the bottom. And then it did this one, which is, again, you've got a nice image of the sun here with a good halo around it. I've got some placeholders, some FPOs for where my images would go. And then finally, it gave me this one, which is my favorite one. So this is what you were talking about earlier, Lars, is how information dense these sites are. Yeah, and so it created this in minutes. It gave me 3 options in minutes. I think if I were going to do a +1 to this, I would do screenshots at 3 breakpoints for Edge, 600, 900, and 1200. And I would do a mobile version too, since APAC is mobile first and so is EDS. So it makes sense to design for mobile first here. But yeah, those were my lessons learned. And then going into, again, this is the folder structure. Briefings is, I took my Rockstars markup, those code files that I marked up with XMP metadata. I don't know if you saw it, but I took the boilerplate code off of Adobe and I marked it up with XMP metadata. I took those files and I converted them to markdown files, and you can actually generate an EDS pattern library off of them by bulking in markdown files into briefings. And then I can create an email pattern library too. But future
Can we
days.
see that?
I will. I'll send you the Loom, Lars. I shouldn't have. I was rushing to generate it, and I didn't get it. But I'll send you the Loom on it and share the files across to you. But yeah, this is benefits, dependencies, and risks. The biggest assumption, which we've proven, is that this will meaningfully lift conversion. But a lot of people have had the same experience as I have, and this is true. Agentic outputs can pinpoint cultural nuance and execution. If I have anyone on the call who is from Japan or lives there currently or has Japanese, I would love to know how close I got.
And I think in production, you would always test that with the Japanese team on the ground, right? And I think a big advantage with this approach is that normally what you do is you hand it over to an agency, right? That agency is external, and you don't have and giving feedback is expensive, right? Which means you tend to overspecify in the beginning. You end up with something that is overly rigid, right? And then when the team on the ground has actual feedback, right? And if one of my pet peeves is that the word experience has two translations in German. One which is Erlebnis, which is the living part of the experience, and the other one is Erfahrung, which is a backward looking part of the experience. And in about 75% of cases, translators pick the wrong translation, right? And typically you could give that feedback very easy, right? You could say, I know you've been trying to translate experience, you've been picking the wrong word, pick the right word. But if it's a complicated and long process that has many people and organizations involved, that feedback often is not coming, right? But if you can say, yeah, actually that was just an agent that built it, it's much cheaper to give that feedback, and it's much cheaper to incorporate it in a 1.1.
That actually, you're giving me another idea, which is that the Stardust interview process, where it interviews you about the brand before it rebrands something. Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about campaign briefs lately, right? And the original reason for a campaign brief was to direct human creative resources and align them against a single strategy, to your point, to help with alignment later on in stakeholders. Yes. But now we're recreating campaign briefs with AI to direct agents with AI. And I've been rethinking that whole experience because the problem to be solved is totally different. The job to be done here is different by the artifact, right? And I really think what Stardust is doing is the future of campaign briefs and creative briefs in general, because what it's doing is it's creating a markdown file for the agent to execute on. Yeah. And it's, instead of asking me to, fill out a creative brief and get alignment, it's interviewing me. And it's giving me options. And I just think it's like next level content supply chain right there, which is the interview process and the markdown output. That's really how it should be handled in my mind.
Yeah. And I think this is also pointing to one of the structural changes that this agentic workflow is driving, right? Which is the person who has the authority to decide should be the person driving the agent. And whenever you're delegating that driving the agent to somebody else, you are introducing so much friction in the workflow that you're basically losing a lot of the benefits, right? And that means for organizations, it means either delegate responsibility, right? And enable the people who are able to drive an agent to make decisions autonomously, or get AI native decision makers that can do it on their own, right? But you don't want to be in a situation where, and in Germany we always joke about senior decision makers who are still using fax machines, right? You don't want somebody use a fax machine to send a fax to the person that is then going to prompt the agent. and is using 20th century technology to drive 21st century experiences.
That's so interesting because it gets into personalization tokens, right? And we all see Claude mirror us, right? It chooses a tone that it thinks we want to hear.
Yes.
And so if you pass the agent to someone else, now it has to adapt to a different mirror and a different personalization tone. You're losing runway, you're losing efficiency in the process. But I think that really speaks to the importance of an entity taxonomy, a dual-sided one, which is not just like how do Adobe's agents interact with each other, and how do Adobe's agents interact with other agents, from other vendors. So how do people interact with agents? How do we have governance taxonomies for people. I have seen and build many taxonomies for agents, but we don't often talk about like what's the handoff, who's allowed to interact with what agent and when. And I think that's kind of like a Substack article in process, I guess.
Yeah. So you have a couple of, and I'm not going to read all of that. So what are the pitfalls that we should watch out for? Where's this going to break apart?
So I think understanding multi-site management design and DA.live, I think very good architects and developers do it very well. I think there's more opportunities to democratize the how-to of that and the best practices there, because a big part of regional and frictionless governance is making sure that it can be enforced by the platform, and it doesn't require a lot of hand-holding, so that if someone does have an agency or a non-captive resource authoring it, like, decisions have consequences, mistakes have consequences. We just want to make sure we're protecting our clients. That's all.
Yeah. And we have a question on the chat. Actually, Ron, is there a button that I can click to highlight?
There is.
Here we go.
Look at that.
So Raf is asking, most if not all the agents I've worked with are in English. Do they also take language nuances into consideration? And from my experience, I'm using agents both in English and in German. And yes, right, it depends on the agent. And but if you use the bigger models from Anthropic or OpenAI or even XAI, they are absolutely able to get nuance, at least in German, which is, I think it's one of the top 5 languages on the internet. So it's big on the training set, but they're definitely able to get these nuances and explain them. So I would say yes. And I had an interesting experience over the weekend where I was trying to get an agent to produce something in Estonian, and the agent said, "I don't speak Estonian natively," which I found extremely funny, because do you speak English natively? Right? I think you speak token natively. So it's that was an interesting thing to read, and then I gave it to another agent, and the agent pointed out, yeah, you might want to double check the grammar on that. So it's and Estonian is interesting, right? It's a language that has maybe 1 million speakers. It has I think 14 or 16 different tenses, so it's a difficult language to master. So I was
But you raise an interesting point, which is that prompting is just writing clear instructions that a machine can understand. You say the agent speaks tokens, right? So that's one reason why I think prompt engineers should live in IT. It's because you're just writing instructions in code, but now you're writing them with words instead. It's essentially verbal programming. And so I always want to say, if you want to find the right prompt engineer on your team to skill up, look for the person who writes the most detailed pull requests and the most detailed descriptions, the best documentation. That's your person, right? Because you're just making the leap from code to words.
And I would say that it's a very, very difficult signal to come by, right? Because these days well, I've produced more than 1,000 pull requests this year, and I haven't written a single one, right? So there's if you go through my Git history, you can see a very clear line when my pull requests became very, very elaborate, and right, and that's not really representative of what I did before. So it's so we might have to look out for people. I think looking out for pre-AI output is one signal. But I think the other signal that is interesting is just to see what people are able to achieve with AI, right? Give them fun and creative tasks, and rate them on the weirdness of the outcome.
That's awesome. So I also think that's awesome. I have to sit with that one for a second. I think but I also think that intelligence is the use of tools, and that there's a perception that pre-AI versus AI, right? So it's just a tool. And so I also think that people such as yourselves, who have worked to standards, very high standards in the field for a long time, that knowledge and experience compounds on itself with AI, where now you're training a model to your standards repeatedly, day after day, and you're holding it within boundaries to those standards that you hold yourselves. And so I also think there's a case to be made for taking the personalization tokens of someone like yourself and scrubbing them and reinvesting them into broader models so that other people can get the benefit of your years of experience and knowledge and standards. So, I mean, I don't know. I think I went off on a tangent. Sorry.
Yeah. No, okay. Let's keep going.
Okay. I want to make sure everyone signs up for Adapt to this year. It's the 15-year anniversary of Adapt to. You should go. I'm doing a crazy hack with a pancake printer and a smarter coffee machine, where I'm going to have.
Did you say pancake printer and smart coffee machine?
Yeah. So it started as a joke, where someone was asking me if they could. They're like, "What are you going to tell me, that you can make pancakes and coffee with AEM?" And in my head, I'm like, "Well, if we put an IP address on your coffee maker, then sure, you can make coffee with AEM." But when I would tell the story, I would never tell the pancakes part of it, because I'm like, I don't actually know how you would do that. And then I was in a thrift store in Seattle, and I found the weirdest appliance I've ever seen in a thrift store, which is called the Pancake Pot 2.0. It is a 3D pancake printer, and I was like, oh my God, now I can finally make pancakes with AEM. And so what I'm going to do is, there's real world applications here. This is not just pancakes and maple syrup and coffee. I can go through all the use cases and the real world applications, but the point is to make people laugh and to get their imaginations working and to be creative.
And I can tell you that the comment section on YouTube is going as wild about pancakes as I am.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think AI and robotics and AEM and bringing these platforms into the physical world is so interesting, right? You can do so much with it, and pancakes as a service.
Pancakes as a service. There you
Someone commented that on my LinkedIn post about this, and I had to borrow it. It's a good one. Pancakes as a service.
Okay, well, this is excellent. Lisa, thank you for sharing your Stardust explorations. I think the matrix that you apply to grounding the regionalization that actual brands are using, and then feeding that back into the AI. I think that's a terrific way of tackling this hallucination problem, right? Where you often don't really know where to trust the agent, but if you say, you know what, here I'm going to get a couple of agents to fan out, right? Just compare a couple of sites across a couple of rubrics, then compile that into something that is reliable, and then feed that back into Stardust. Is a really powerful technique, and it's something that I would say we still underutilize, right? When 2 years ago, doing a research task like this was basically almost impossible, right? Unless you had an army of interns, right? And then it would take 2 weeks, and you would still need to have the right interns that are speaking the language and so on. And now you can just say, Claude, give me 16 sub agents and burn through my tokens. I have work to do.
Thanks for having me. It's just, yeah, the stuff you can do with these agents with a little like functional imagination is just incredible. And quick plug for Slick, it is awesome as a functional person for rapid ideation and rapid iteration, because with Slick, I imagine a synthetic data set. I imagine a few markdown files, then I can prove it pretty quickly whether it's valid or not, which allows for the evaluation of a different build, or the same build again. So it's just, yeah, the stuff you're coming out with, it's just, it's the end of manual work. It's the beginning of imaginative, like.
And one thing I should mention there is that Carl, who's my co-collaborator on Slick, actually ported Claude's workflow system or UltraCode system to Slick, which means you can basically task like this, right? Where you want 16 agents, 24 agents, if you can afford the tokens, 50 agents, work in parallel and then orchestrate them. That's now supported natively. So it's
that's cool.
really,
I'm gonna have to try that this weekend. Yeah.
So we have a skill for that.
That's cool. Yeah.
All right. Very cool. So if anybody, I mean, everyone's talking about the smart pancakes in chat. So if there's any other questions other than the smart pancakes, and you know, hashtag smart sausage, savvy eggs, you know, stuff like that.
Okay. So while we are waiting for the last question to come in, Lisa already answered the question where we can see her speak next time, which is at Adaptive. And that leaves me with my standard closing question.
Exactly.
When are you going to be able to see us again?
Yeah. So we have a session in 2 weeks. No, 2 weeks. No. So we are off for the 4th of July summer shutdown. Adobe closes, and so we don't have a show that week. But the following week, which is on July 6th, we will have a show. So stay tuned for that. We don't have a session set up for that. We have new content coming, certainly on July 6th. In August, about a month from then, we will also do one on SEMrush. So we'll give you updates on those as well.
Excellent. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to seeing you again. And Lisa, thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your knowledge, and for taking our products where we didn't dare to dream to take them.
Yes, exactly. We're like, wait, what? You can do that? Holy cow.
Thank you for the opportunity. This has been really, really fun.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And we will see you in about 3 weeks. Cheers.
And Lisa, stay on, because